You're listening to or watching the We Are West Ham podcast, Opposition View, with me, Will Pugh, and joining us once again is friend of mine, friend of the podcast, sports journalist at The Athletic and huge Crystal Palace fan. It's Max Mathews. Maxie, great to see you again and have you on the pod. As always, West Ham v Crystal Palace, Saturday, 3 o'clock, a 12th versus 14th mammoth mid-table clash. It's one of those weird ones where I feel like it's guaranteed to be a good game, but yet it will still be miles down the match of the day running order, no matter how many goals there are, because no one really cares.
Don't start me on how Palace are routinely overlooked on match of the day. I think like earlier in the season we were in like an unbelievable 2-2 draw against Villa, like end to end, loads of chances, missed penalty, so much drama. And then like Forest 1-0 Bournemouth was like 4 matches ahead of it, and I was like, "What is going on here?" But anyway, I'm not bitter, so it's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. It's funny though, isn't it? 'Cause I swear every team feels like their team gets stuffed by match of the day. But yeah. I do feel like ours is quite bad, but a lot of the time we deserve it because our games are rubbish. But I kind of do agree. I feel like Palace are probably one of those teams where, regardless of the game, unless you beat Manchester United 4-0 away, you're not getting top 3 most weeks.
Yeah, no chance. What can you do?
So what are you feeling about how's the season going then? A little bit of a dodgy start. It's been a bit funny for Glasner. Came in, positive start, bit of an iffy start to the season. You've recovered some form in the last sort of 4 or 5 games or so. What's the feeling among Palace fans at the moment?
Well, Palace fans are very, very much behind Oliver Glasner, despite the slightly tricky start to the season, which included that home defeat against your boys. But it was a bit of a perfect storm in the summer, to be honest, because we had loads of players away on international duty, which doesn't happen very often for a team like Palace. But Lerma and Munoz, were in the Colombia squad for Copa America, got right to the final, and they're real kind of stalwarts in that team. So they played loads of minutes over there. Mateta barely had a break, who's our top scorer, our kind of most clinical attacker, barely had a break because he was playing for the France Olympic team all the way up to the final of the men's football. Wharton, Eze were playing for England. Obviously, Wharton didn't get any minutes, but he picked up a kind of serious injury in training, which must have been quite intense, one imagines, and has barely played this season. And he was probably our best player in the second half of last season and really integral to the team. And when we went on that run of 6 wins in 7 games at the end of last season. So the summer came at a really bad time, basically. And then with a lot of players coming into the season affected by injury, lots of them hadn't had a break. And then we did do some business, but I think we got like 4 players on deadline day. And Glasner publicly was saying how unhappy he was with all of that because basically they didn't have the time
wanted, to get or because it was too late.
Both.
Right. Who did you sign? Just remind everyone who you did sign.
We got Trevoh Chalobah on the loan from Chelsea,
who's now been cruelly whipped away from you.
Yeah, don't start me on Chelsea and how they handle their players. We also got Eddie Nketiah for 25, rising to 30 million, which hasn't quite worked out so far. I think Maxence Lacroix came in pretty late as well. So a lot of the additions came later in the window, which means they naturally take a bit of time to get up to speed. And on top of that, Glasner's teams traditionally start off quite slowly in the season because he really beasts them physically in terms of like really intense physical training at the start. And then they kind of tend to pay dividends later in the season when they're much fitter. And so all of those factors together means that we started the season very badly, and then confidence is low and mistakes happen and that kind of thing. But now we seem to be getting in our groove. I think we've only lost 1 in 10 in the league, and that was against Arsenal. And we're pretty unlucky to lose away against Arsenal in the Carabao Cup quarters as well.
3-2 that one, wasn't it?
exactly with that offside goal, but no VAR, despite it being between two Premier League teams. But again, I'm not too
You're
upset
still
about
not
that.
bitter. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
still not
definitely,
bitter.
definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, like things are looking pretty good, and we're getting back into our groove after the start of the season. And I think 10th isn't beyond us. So considering
No,
we were pretty much in a relegation battle for the first few months of the season, that's not too bad.
yeah, quite. I mean, when we've spoken before, Maxi, tongue in cheek, I have suggested that Crystal Palace are the perennial 14th place finishers in the Premier League. So to see Crystal Palace at 14th, not perhaps the most surprising thing to some football fans. But to be fair, I think me included in this, I thought Glasner was a really good appointment. I watched his Eintracht Frankfurt teams when they played against West Ham. They got to obviously won the Europa League. I genuinely was really impressed with the appointment. Just sort of proves how much money's in the Premier League nowadays, I suppose, because you'd imagine there's a few big European teams would have been queuing up to sort of making their manager. Brilliant end to the season last season. Given the sort of, joking around perennial 14th finishes and you now saying 10th is on, are you left with a bit of frustration, as it sounds like Glasner was, that actually perhaps if the club and the board had acted a bit more decisively over the summer or a bit swifter, that 10th might not necessarily be the ceiling this year?
Yeah, that's a very perceptive question, because I think there is kind of frustration with the fan
honestly,
base.
mate, that is the sort of guy that I am.
Yeah. Do your prep work.
Yeah.
But there's no frustration at all with Glasner, because they're recognizing that he's kind of doing a job really well, given the limitations that were imposed on him, and given that he kind of has one hand behind his back. And there is more frustration with the board, that problems that were evident in the summer, for example, lack of cover at wing back. We have Munoz and Mitchell, who are pretty good, but Mitchell has basically played every single game for the last 4 seasons with no rest. Munoz is really great player, but no cover for him really,
Maxi,
other than
on that point, Tyrick Mitchell could make his 154th Premier League appearance for Crystal Palace on Saturday at West Ham, which would move him outright 10th place in the Eagles' all-time Premier League games, ahead of how many? Give 5 points to Max if you can guess who he moves ahead of. Currently level with Premier League all-time appearances. He's on 153.
I'll say Punchin.
Oh, what a guess! Absolutely smashed it out of the park.
Love to see
bullseye. Yeah. I do know what you mean. So it's quite nice to hear sort of a fan base of being able to see a little bit more of what's at stake, because basically it sounds like what you're saying is that Glasner is playing the cards he's been dealt the best he possibly can. And I think, I get frustrated a lot of the time at West Ham when I feel like, our fans just don't take into account other factors that affect on pitch performance, as well as who the manager is. Tottenham, Ange Postecoglou's getting quite a lot of grief at the moment. 3 of their 4 starting defenders are out. What you're talking about there, these things, like with the board and the transfer business and when it gets done, these things have a big impact on teams' ability, don't they? And it sounds like because of that slowness in the in the transfer market, that you almost have to write off the first sort of 5 or 6 games of the season. And if you're able to start in the form you're in now, then it'd be a bit better. I mean, you're coming fresh off the back of a 2-0 win at Leicester City Wednesday night that was. So we've got an extra 24 hours recovery, having beaten Fulham at home 3-2 on Tuesday night. You absolutely thrashed high flyers Stockport County 1-0 in the FA Cup third round on Sunday. We obviously went down to Aston Villa Friday night. So are you sort of concerned at all that going into the game against West Ham, you've played Sunday and then again on Wednesday, and we've played Friday night, lots of recovery, Tuesday night Fulham, and then an extra day recovery again. Is that a worry at all?
It's not fantastic, especially considering there was kind of flu in the camp, and that a handful of players, maybe half a dozen players, missed out against Stockport, who may have played. because of that. That said, we were pretty much back to full strength against Leicester. And without making excuses, Glasner and I think Gay as well were saying, it was particularly tough on the players who had to kind of come back in and then play 90 minutes. So
yeah,
it might be a bit of a factor towards the end of the game. But I should think that we'll put out a pretty strong lineup and that hopefully we're not too troubled by fatigue, at least until maybe the latter stages.
Fair enough. Just fill fans in then, Maxie, the West Ham fans listen to this. Trevoh Chalobah, you got him in from Chelsea. It was a loan over the summer. I was quite surprised, to be fair. I think he put in a few Chelsea fans I know felt exactly the same way. Felt there was certainly a place for him in the squad or on the bench, if not the starting 11. He's come in, performed, or you tell me how he's performed, but then just let fans know what's happened now and, what sort of impact that'll have on you because of how he was playing before.
Yeah, the Chalobah saga. So he at first Palace's defense was a little bit all over the place. The back three in Glasner's kind of traditional back three, because Gay had played the whole summer for England. Lacroix was a new signing, and obviously Chalobah was a new signing, and they were clearly the first choice back three. But it took them quite a long time to get used to each other and to kind of build up that familiarity. They all played on the left and the center and the right of the back three at different points, kind of shifting around to try and find the balance that worked the best. So for the first 3 or 4 games when they played, it looked a little bit disjointed, which is understandable. But then once they had kind of figured out the right configuration and they had, some games to get up to speed, they were looking really strong. And they're all good in the air. They're all quick. They're all strong. And they all have threat from set pieces as well. And they've chipped in with a fair few goals. So having built that back three, I think there's kind of frustration from Palace about how it was handled from Chelsea with a kind of...
So what's happened? What tell people what's happened?
Yeah. Well, basically, Palace wanted to play Chalobah in the FA Cup against Stockport. Yeah. And the message was conveyed somehow from the Chelsea hierarchy that they'd prefer him not to play in case that he was recalled. And obviously Chelsea were thinking that they didn't want him to be cup tied if he played for Palace and then couldn't play for Chelsea in the competition, particularly as they were clearly considering recalling him from that loan. And now Chelsea have activated that option to bring him back. So, I mean, Palace's hands are tied. That clause was in the loan deal. I guess they didn't maybe expect Chelsea to do it, given how many players they have there, and especially considering they'd specifically strengthened that position in the summer with Tosin joining, that they also rated Achampong quite highly. And given that Chalobah was in the bomb squad, that is, he was made to train with the under-21s, they stripped him of his squad number and gave it to Joao Felix. And it was clear that he was really unwanted at Chelsea and being shoved out the door, despite his kind of Chelsea fans thinking that he was one of the most impressive defensive performers at the end of last season alongside Thiago Silva. That was when they went on a run of, I think, 5 wins in a row or something to end the season under Pochettino. Yeah. And obviously being an academy product as well with like really close ties to the club. So a bit of frustration from Palace about how it was handled by Chelsea, but you kind of always leave yourself open to that kind of thing if the clause is there. With regards to what we'll do now, the understanding is that Palace won't seek to directly replace him because they feel that Chris Richards, who played a lot at the end of last season in our
youngster, is he?
Run. Pardon?
Youngster.
Chris Richards, I think he's 24, 25, so not super young, but not getting on. And he's decent. He starts for the US men's national team.
24.
Yeah. Also, Chadi Riyad has been another summer signing at centre-back, left footer we got from Barcelona. He started all right. I think he made his debut in the fixture against West Ham. And then he had a long-term knee injury, and he's back now as well and played 90 minutes against Stockport and looked pretty good. So I think the understanding from Palace is that they'll cover it with Richards and Riyad and maybe Nathaniel Klein as well. But that said, I think I would maybe like one more body there to add a bit of cover, because obviously Richards and Riyad have had kind of injury issues, and Klein is, maybe emergency cover, but you wouldn't want him starting every week. But I think it will be Richards playing in the back three as he did against Leicester, against West Ham.
Right. tell me then, Maxi, what formation should West Ham fans expect from Palace, and what's your starting 11 in those positions?
So you should expect Glasner's usual 3-4-2-1. Fans who watched his Frankfurt team win the Europa League will be very familiar with that. So it'll be Henderson in goal, back three of Richards, Lacroix, right to left, and then Munoz right wing back, Mitchell left wing back. I expect it to be Hughes and Doucouré in centre mid. I think Glasner tends to prefer Lerma rather than Doucouré, but he limped off against Leicester after 20 minutes. So I think given the short turnaround, it will be Doucouré starting. Then number 10 positions will be Sarr and Eze playing off Mateta up front.
Yeah, well, and what sort of goals are Palace scoring at the moment? I've got another stat for you here. Jean-Philippe Mateta now has 30 Prem goals for Crystal Palace. Only Wilfred Zaha and Christian Benteke having netted more for the South London club. Obviously, he's your top goal scorer, as you mentioned. What sort of type of goals are you scoring? Is it quite sort of formatted, your attacking patterns of play, or is it a bit more random?
I would actually say a bit of both, if that makes sense. We are getting our fair share of set pieces. I think we've scored 9 set piece goals, and only Arsenal have more with 12, which is pretty good, considering especially attacking set pieces has often been a kind of weakness for Crystal Palace. But we seem to be getting a fair few goals from that. Other than that, I would say it tends to be one of the number 10s getting the ball in space, so Eze or Sarr. And though they'll kind of do different things when they get it, Sarr will tend to pick up the ball and dribble forwards and kind of use his pace or get behind the defence. Eze tends to maybe kind of pick out a pass or shift inside and that kind of thing, create an angle like that. But it tends to be one of the number 10s getting the ball and somehow getting the ball into Mateta. And his finishing has been really good for someone who, you know, even a year ago, people weren't sure whether Odsonne Edouard should be starting ahead of him. And Edouard is now like third choice striker at Leicester and got sent back, even though they're doing really badly. Also, I would say Daniel Munoz is a really potent attacking outlet in a way that Mitchell isn't really on the other side. And so a lot of Palace's play will be kind of driving balls across to Munoz and kind of switching play if they're a bit more focused down the left, and Eze has a couple of players around him, and Munoz can kind of almost be as high as like an auxiliary winger, and he presses as a winger as well sometimes as part of a front three when Glasner kind of shifts the shape up a little bit, and Munoz is kind of quick and good in the air, so he's a real outlet as well for getting us up the pitch.
Yeah, quite dangerous. Right, Maxi, I'm going to ask you for some predictions in here. I've got a stat pack here. I had eyes on this through work, so I thought it'd be a good time to use it. Right, West Ham have scored in each of their last 21 Premier League games against Crystal Palace, which is their longest scoring run against any opponent in our top flight history. Crystal Palace are unbeaten in their last 5 Premier League away games at West Ham. Only at Tottenham, have you had a longer run without defeat on the road in their top flight history. That was between 1990 and 2004. We're looking to do the double over you for the first time in 8 years since the 16-17 season. But the 2-0 win at Selhurst Park earlier in the season was West Ham's first clean sheet against you in 15 meetings. So it screams goals to me. I've got 2-2. I think it's got 2-2 written all over it. I watched us against Fulham. And although we were good and we were good value for the win, I'm glad we won. Fulham hit the woodwork twice, as well as the 2 goals they did score, and they handed us a couple on a plate. And final little one for you. I got West Ham's Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who faces his old team, of course, on Saturday. Has been directly involved in 3 goals across his last 10 Premier League games, 2 goals and 1 assist, which is as many as in his previous 73 appearances in the competition. West Ham 2, Palace 2, maybe a Wan-Bissaka goal or assist. But Graham Potter's actually playing him as a right back, which is nice. But how do you see the game going?
I see it similar to you. I think it will be score-draw. But I think given that Palace have been pretty good defensively on the road, Clean sheets against Bournemouth, Ipswich, Leicester off the top of my head. Although we haven't played any really big teams away from home. We haven't played Liverpool or City or Arsenal, I don't think, yet.
Really big teams like West Ham, you mean, of course.
Yeah. I think it'll be 1-1.
1-1. There we go. Well, score draws from me and Max there. Is there sort of where do you think Palace will finish this season then? Do you sort of said 10th is the ceiling? It's pretty much where West Ham are looking at the moment. All it needs is a bit of a run, doesn't it, from any of those teams around us? Obviously, Tottenham, you're sandwiched between Tottenham and Man United at time of recording. It's sort of Bournemouth have got a bit of a run from Bournemouth in 8th upwards, but Fulham are on 30 points in 9th. There's only 7 points between Fulham in 9th and Man United in 15th. It's kind of anyone's, isn't it? Where do you see Palace finishing?
I think probably 11th, 12th. I think there's like a meme about Palace always finishing 12th. I think we lost like 4 games in 5 last season, and we started that run 12th and we ended it in 12th still somehow. It's like we just can't escape the purgatory.
It's just something in the Premier League charter where Crystal Palace must finish between 12th and 15th every season.
Yeah.
Listen, Max, it's been great having you on the We Are West Ham podcast once again. Thanks as always for your time, Max Mathews there, sports journalist at The Athletic and big Crystal Palace fan, chatting ahead of that game Saturday afternoon, 3:00 at the London Stadium. Graham Potter's, second Premier League game in charge of the Hammers. Thank you for listening. As always, don't forget to sign up on patreon.com/We Are West Ham podcast. If you want to support me and James, you get 2 podcast episodes a week for less than the price of a cup of coffee. And you get the opposition view, the normal reaction, plus any other bonus ones when we have interviews or games. It's ad-free listening, and you get them 24 hours before your non-paying counterparts. Follow us on socials as well. You know where to go at. We are _West Ham on Twitter. We are West Ham Pod on Instagram, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the game on Saturday up the Hammers. West Ham are massive, and we'll speak to you next